What's going on, everybody? So as you can tell, this is not your typical video. This is going to be purely audio only. I decided today to switch it up, sort of do more of like a podcast. I guess this technically is a podcast because podcasts are just audio instead of a video. And I'm going to discuss many different things regarding the Packers, and it's going to be a little bit more laid back and chill and just sort of me discussing whatever comes to my head, whatever comes to my mind, and there are certain topics I want to go over in this video. But I figured that I would do something different today, switch it up. And so I set a timer on my phone for 30 minutes. And so I'm just going to talk about the Packers and the future, the past, the present, all those different exciting things that we have here going on in Green Bay for the next 30 minutes or so. And then going forward, we'll see if I do this again. Who knows? But I'm so used to like sitting in front of a camera. And it feels a little different to just sort of sit and talk and, not only be focused on the audio. So I'm actually currently sitting in my closet in the dark because I wanted to just solely sit here with my thoughts. And now I have a mic in front of my mouth, but that's pretty much all that's going on right here. But there's been lots of discussion, as there always is, regarding the Packers. What does the future hold? What's it going to look like next season? And it's a pretty interesting time because of Aaron Rodgers, as it has been, for years and years. And it's crazy to look back on what sort of happened here in Green Bay for the past almost 2 decades with Aaron Rodgers being drafted by the Packers back in 2005. And at that time, like if I look back for myself, like I don't even remember Aaron Rodgers being drafted. I think I was born in 97. So in 2005, I was only 8 years old. And at that point, I was a huge Packers fan. My mom, as I've told you guys on the channel, if you guys have watched for a while on my YouTube channel, my mom grew up in Wisconsin, raised me as a Packers fan. So since I can even remember, I was sitting in front of the TV watching Brett Favre sling the rock. And so, growing up as a kid, you don't know everything that's going on. You just like to sit in front of the TV and watch the game when it's on. And so I wasn't even very aware of Rodgers when he got drafted. And it wasn't really until, the entire Brett Favre's, retiring and then deciding to come back, that entire situation, that I really, started to know more about Rodgers as he took over. And funny side note, I was thinking about this the other day. Back when I was in high school, we had this thing where we had to do like a speech, and I was just remembering the other day, I did Brett Favre's retirement speech, so my entire class got to witness basically everything Brett Favre had to say. And I think it's funny looking back, like I did that in high school because my entire life, I've been a Packers fan, and so it's fun that now I get to discuss the Packers all the time because it's something that I love to do, as you guys probably assume. It's fun to talk with other Packers fans as well. But now when it comes to Rodgers, as I've discussed on the channel time and time again, we don't really know right now what his decision is going to be. And as we heard yesterday, if you watched the Pat McAfee show, it's been cool because he's been on almost every week, maybe besides the final, right after the final game against the Lions when he lost. I don't think he was on, but since that Tuesday he missed, he's been on the past, I think, 3 weeks or so. And so while he hasn't come to a decision yet, he still clearly is trying to figure out what he wants to do. It's been fun to sort of hear his thought process and sort of what he's thinking on and what he's going through right now. And one of the biggest things that was discussed yesterday with Rodgers was, the 4-day isolation retreat that he's going to be doing. And it sounds somewhat interesting. I don't know if I would want to do 4 days in complete darkness. Like I feel like I could do, for a short period of time sitting in the dark, which I sort of am doing at this time. And there's a little light in here, but as I'm sitting here in my closet talking to this mic, but 4 straight days with complete darkness, I just wonder what would happen in like day 2, day 3, or at that point, because do you have any indication of if it's like daytime, if it's nighttime? Would you just be confused as to what time it actually is? Would you like start to lose the concept of time if you've no, communication to the outside world, no way of your body knowing if the sun is up, if the sun is down? I don't know how that would go, as the time progresses, and I'm not sure I would want to do that. But I think it's cool that Rodgers wants to do that. He always, wants to sort of does his own thing, does whatever he feels like is best for him, and I'm all for anyone doing what they think is best for themselves to figure out what they want to figure out. And one thing is for sure, that in those 4 days, Rodgers will have lots of time to dissect the situation and really figure out if he wants to come back. And I've said for the past couple of weeks that it really seems to me I just can't see him leaving right now, with the fact that he really still thinks he can play at the highest level. He said that on the Pat McAfee show, that he still believes he can play at, an MVP level. And when you add that with the fact that he still has that competitive itch to play, he joined that golf tournament, the Pro-Am or whatever it was that he won. He joined that because he still has that itch to compete. And so when you add those two factors, I just find it hard to really think that he could come to that conclusion after, with all that he's going to leave right now, and he still feels like he has some left in the tank. But at the same time, Aaron Rodgers sort of does what he feels like is best for himself in the moment, and I guess there is that chance, even though it feels small in my mind, that he retires. It feels, I just don't see it happening. I feel like I just don't see him retiring right now, but that could happen, and Pat McAfee even asked Rodgers yesterday on the show, is retirement really still an option? Because Pat McAfee sort of seemed to be in the same boat, believing that it just sort of sounds like Rodgers is going to come back and play again. And Rodgers said, yeah, like that's still on the table. He hasn't made his decision. He is still contemplating what he wants to do. And when we look back to Rodgers' press conference after the final game against the Lions, he was asked if he would be able to feel okay with retiring and basically hanging it up after going out with that loss. And he stated that he's proved to himself he's done really everything he wants to do in the league, and that he would be okay with walking away. And I really do believe that. I think that he would be fine doing it, even though it seems like he could maybe accomplish more. I think he's pretty satisfied and grateful with all the different things he has done in his time here in the NFL, all of it being with Green Bay. And it's crazy to look back on, as I was saying, when he was drafted 2005, I was only 8 years old, and now he's, about to retire, maybe, sometime in the next few years. And now I'm sitting at 25 years old, so pretty much, most of my life has been spent, watching Aaron Rodgers. And so to imagine a team without Rodgers sounds pretty wild. And whenever that time does come, when he does decide to hang it up and retire, we'll see if Jordan Love can, keep the I guess the tradition alive of the Packers, having one of the elite quarterbacks for 10, 15 years or so, because it's crazy enough to sort of go from a Brett Favre to an Aaron Rodgers, and if that could happen with Jordan Love, that would be incredible, and I hope that happens. And as I've sort of thought about Love in the future, Jordan Love in the future, I do think he's going to be a very good player, and maybe that's solely my optimism and my love for the Packers, pushing through, but just watching his development over the past few seasons, from being drafted by the Packers back in 2020. His first couple of years looked a little shaky in the preseason, but this past preseason, in the short period of time that he played against the Eagles back in whatever week that was when Rodgers went out and Love came in, like he looks a lot better. And I think when we also throw in the fact of Matt LaFleur after the preseason saying he looks light years ahead of where he was in prior years, we had Aaron Rodgers after the preseason saying that Jordan Love was a master of the offense. To hear those kinds of things from Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers, like Aaron Rodgers doesn't have to praise Jordan Love. He doesn't need to say he's a master of the offense. I feel like he would only say that if he actually believed that. And so to hear those kinds of things, and then to see the talent and the different ways that Love has progressed when you watch that Eagles game, his timing was on point, his footwork was on point. He's got a strong arm. It looked like he really knew what he was doing. And so if for whatever reason Rodgers isn't here in Green Bay in 2023, whether he retires, whether the Packers and Rodgers come together, let's say Rodgers decides that he wants to play again, but the Packers and Rodgers don't think that it's going to work together, maybe he gets traded, and we can go into that in a second as well. But sticking on the Jordan Love point, if Love is a starter in 2023, I'm honestly pretty excited for, I think, the potential that he has, and it really will only be until we can see a full season of Jordan Love as a starting quarterback, coming in, being the guy, because if Rodgers retires or gets traded, Love will come into training camp as the number one guy, the starter, whereas in years past, he's been the backup. There's a huge difference there, a different expectation. He's going to have to come in and be the leader, as, all NFL QBs have to come in and be. And so I'm very optimistic for what Love can be, and I think to have two young, solid weapons on offense in Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs to potentially pair alongside Jordan Love if he does happen to be the starter in 2023, I think that's a pretty solid foundation for this Packers team going forward. And I think also, too, when you look at the fact we still have Aaron Jones, we still have A.J. Dillon, I think our offensive line is still pretty solid. Bakhtiari seemed to sort of get over that injury, that knee injury throughout the season. He'll be back, and when he was fully healthy and playing, he was still playing as one of the top tackles in the NFL, even though he is getting a little bit up there in age. We have Zach Tom, who, being drafted in the 4th round, has really, in his first season, been very productive at many different positions. So we have him on there in the line, whether that's at tackle, whether that's at guard. Josh Nijman, I believe, is a restricted free agent, so the Packers could, I think, put some kind of tender on him. I think a second-round tender would be about $4 million, which they should be able to keep him there. The other tender, which is called like a right of first refusal, I think is like 2-point-something million. So I feel like he'll be around as well, and so that's another piece at tackle who he's been a pretty solid player at tackle for the Packers. So the Packers are pretty set, I think, on the O-line right now, at least for 2023 with Elton Jenkins, being at guard, Josh Myers at center, running at guard. I think this line is pretty solid. We have some solid weapons at wide receiver, and we have a still very solid backfield. So if Rodgers is gone, and if Love is a starter, I don't think that we're necessarily going to take a huge dip when it comes to the performance of the offense, because I think when you look at last year, 2022, Packers offense was, I'm trying to remember the exact rank they were at when it came to scoring, maybe around 17th or so. And that was with, Rodgers having to build a chemistry with the young receivers, with Rodgers having all those different injuries he suffered in 2022. And while Jordan Love, at least, we don't know if Jordan Love is going to be as talented as an Aaron Rodgers, of course. That's for that to happen would be very incredible, and those are some, I think it's rare that would happen because, to have that expectation for Love, following the footsteps of an Aaron Rodgers, I feel like we're all so used to seeing the level of play that we've seen for so long, almost forever for me watching the Packers. I think we have to give Jordan Love some time to develop and sort of be his own person and not really, gauge his performance solely comparing him to Aaron Rodgers, because I don't feel like that's completely fair to Jordan Love, because let's say he comes in, he's like a 10th to 15th best QB in the NFL. That's pretty solid. Like, I feel like you can get things done with a quarterback who maybe isn't at the top of the game, which I'm not saying he can't be, but we have to give him some time to sort of see what kind of player he is, and it takes, young players time to develop, and Love, of course, has had the time to develop when it comes to just learning from Rodgers for 3 years, learning Matt LaFleur's offense, which, as Rodgers said, is now, he believes Jordan Love is a master of that offense. But unlike other players from Jordan Love's draft class in 2020, like Joe Burrow, like Justin Herbert, like Jalen Hurts, those guys have had years of starting experience now, and Love hasn't had that. So they've had time to progress and learn and grow. And Love has as well, just not when it comes to starting. And I think that maybe it takes Love a little bit of time to really get things going and to really become the player that he can be, because, as I said, he hasn't been starting at all. But all that is to basically say that I think that this Packers team could be great next year, even with Jordan Love as quarterback. I think the question comes down to the defensive side of the ball, because the 2022 Packers defense was not great. As disappointing as that was to come into the year, I thought they're going to be a top 5, top 10 defense. I think many of you guys shared a similar belief, just when you look at some added talent on the defense. You add Jair, who was injured all of 2020 or most of 2021. He was coming back. You look at the final game against the Niners when we lose in the playoffs. Everything sort of looked like the Packers defense was going to come in and really be able to handle things, especially with the Packers having to start off with young receivers with Devontae gone. It felt like the defense would be the strength of the team, and that just wasn't the case at all. Luckily, near the end of the year, that sort of shifted a little bit in that direction, thanks in part a lot to different turnovers, and against the Vikings, Jair Alexander matching up a lot more with Justin Jefferson when you compare that to the first matchup against the Vikings in Week 1. And so Joe Barry seemed to be willing to adapt a little bit in those final games. But as I've said recently, if someone, I think someone asked me, I can't remember exactly who it was, someone on YouTube, but asking me, would I have kept Joe Barry if I was Matt LaFleur? Like, if I had to make that decision myself, would I have made the same decision, which it looks like Joe Barry will be back for his 3rd season as the defensive coordinator in Green Bay? Personally, just sort of looking at the 2 years of Joe Barry, there's been some highs, there's been some lows, and it's been inconsistent overall. And well, I truly hope, I really, really hope that what we saw from the defense in the final, 3 or 4 to 5 weeks, which was a lot better than the first half part of the season. I mean, I'm a Packers fan at heart. Like I'm solely a fan. I cheer for the Packers. I root for the Packers, and I want to see Joe Barry be successful if he's still here in Green Bay. Personally, I would have probably moved on just because there's been so much inconsistency, and it really feels like we have so much talent on the defensive side of the ball, and it just hasn't worked out as well as I think it could have. And I guess we'll never know what exactly that potential was. And of course, part of it does fall on the players too. There were lots of missed tackles throughout the year, missed assignments, not great communication at times in the secondary as well. But personally, if I had to make the decision, I would probably move on to someone new, just because I think when you bring someone new in, it sort of shifts it sort of starts you over, and you sort of have a new idea of what could be. But I do hope, I mean, if with Joe Barry most likely returning, which it seems like that's going to be the case, I hope that they can somehow get everything together. Hopefully the defense can continue what they did at the end of last year, or 2022 season. And of course, Rashawn Gary, hopefully he'll be back sometime soon in the season. Of course, he suffered that unfortunate injury, and to have him back will really help this Packers defense. And so, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, I think that this Packers team, has a chance to potentially be a very solid team. And I think when you look at the Packers, being at the top of the NFC for a few years, near the top of the NFC for a few years, to then have a season where you're 8-9, it really feels like a terrible year because we're used to such high expectations, coming into each season. And I think that we had the expectation. I mean, I can speak for myself. I had the expectation that this could be a Super Bowl team, and looking at Devontae leaving, I was like, obviously that's going to hurt a little bit, but I think that we can get things done with Christian Watson, with Romeo Doubs. And I was also hopeful with Sammy Watkins coming in as a free agent that maybe we could get that Sammy Watkins that we saw in the earlier parts of his career when he was healthy, when he was dominating. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And I am someone who always wants to look at like the best possible scenario and hope for that. And I feel like as a fan, that's pretty much what everyone does. And it's like you want to be realistic, but at the same time, you want to hope and believe that the best case scenario can happen. And I do think the best case scenario for the Packers in 2023 is winning a Super Bowl. I think it's possible. It may sound crazy, and we'll have to see sort of how things shake out because we're at the beginning of the offseason, and we don't know what Rodgers is going to do. We don't know many different things right now, and it's sort of just sitting and waiting and seeing what Rodgers' decision is going to be. And then once he makes that decision, that's going to start to get a lot more things rolling, because if you're the Packers, if you're Brian Gutekunst, this front office, you really can't do that. I mean, you can't really do anything until you know what Rodgers is going to do, because it's going to really change the way that you look at the team, the players you draft, the guys that you bring in, the guys you don't bring back, lots of things like that. And as Rodgers has said, I think it was in his final press conference, maybe it was a little bit after that, he wants to know if the Packers are going to be in a rebuild or a reload. And I think for Rodgers, he really wants to have these veterans back, like Robert Tonyan, who is a free agent, like Mercedes Lewis, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb. And I think that if Rodgers were to return, that lots of those guys would probably return, because let's say that's sort of what Rodgers needs to know that he will return, to have some of those guys back. If Brian Gutekunst says, we want you back, but we're not going to bring some of those guys back, maybe Rodgers says, you know what, then I'll go somewhere else. I think that's a possibility. And I think when you look at the relationship of Brian Gutekunst and Aaron Rodgers over the years, it got a little bit rocky when Gutekunst drafted Jordan Love. He came out later and said that he could have done a better job of communicating with Aaron Rodgers because there was no communication. I think Aaron Rodgers was probably a little bit shocked when the Packers decided to use that draft pick on Jordan Love. But over a couple of years since then, they came to that agreement with each other. Rodgers wanted to be more heard when it came to potentially making moves. He sort of felt like the Packers weren't really valuing his opinion or even wanting to hear his opinion when it came to those moves. And as a quarterback in Green Bay for so long, all he's brought to the organization, the Super Bowl, the MVPs, all the great years, he sort of felt like he should have some kind of seat at the table when it came to those conversations. And it seems like they got a lot closer and the relationship was a lot better, and Rodgers had the ability to make at least give his input, have some decisions go his way, like Randall Cobb being traded for back in, 2021 now, from the Texans for a 6th-round pick. And that was solely because Rodgers wanted Cobb back. And so now the question is for Brian Gutekunst is if Rodgers has some, I guess you could say, demands or wants if he is going to return, is Brian Gutekunst willing to sort of change the way he wants to build a team to keep Aaron Rodgers here for one more year? And I'm almost at the point where I don't think he necessarily would want to do that, because I think when you look at Gutekunst, he drafted Jordan Love in 2020. Many people looked down at him at that time because of the draft pick. And I think that unless Gutekunst thinks Jordan Love is terrible, I feel like Love will be the starter in the next year or two, just because I think that Brian Gutekunst wants to see that. That's sort of my speculation based on what we've seen. He hasn't said that. He has praised Jordan Love. And personally, I would be sad to see Love go, because I'm rooting for Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, and unfortunately, both of them can't be the starter for the same team. So it looks like, we don't, honestly, I don't know what it looks like. It looks like right now we have no idea what's going to happen here, and it really, honestly, feels like a coin flip to me with Rodgers returning or not returning. I feel like last year it sort of felt like there was the potential of a trade, but at least in my mind, this year it seems more likely. You have Rodgers discussing, if the Packers decided to go a different way, he would have no hard feelings, everything would be okay. And it really feels like if they decided to trade Rodgers, that right now there wouldn't be that much of discontent toward the front office. I think many people, I think I saw a poll, I don't know if I put this poll out or someone else somewhere on the internet, but the question was, should Aaron Rodgers stay or go? And I think 50% said go. So I think many people would be fine to move to Jordan Love, and I think it could work out, and we'll have to see what happens there with Jordan Love, and I hope to see. I'm rooting for Jordan Love, whatever happens here. And one other thing about Jordan Love is the Packers do have to decide before May 1st, which is the deadline. They have to decide if they want to exercise his 5th-year option. And so he's now been here for 3 seasons in the NFL. If you are a first-round draft pick, you have the ability to exercise that 5th-year option before the 4th season. So if the Packers do exercise that option, I'm pretty sure the contract for Love for that 5th year would be about $20 million guaranteed. So the Packers do have to decide if they want to exercise that. And so if Rodgers returns and the Packers also exercise that option, could that be maybe a hint that Love will be starter in 2024? I think potentially, just because when you look at Aaron Rodgers' contract, then throw on a $20 million guaranteed contract, which I'm pretty sure all of it goes against the cap. I'm not 100% on that. I'll take a look at that. You guys can comment your thoughts on that as well. But that's just a lot of money to have at the quarterback position. And the thing is, with Rodgers' contract, there are ways to minimize the cap hit, to sort of split it up. I'm pretty sure they can sort of exercise an option or something. I'm trying to remember exactly what it is. I talked about it a while ago, but I'm trying to refresh myself here. But basically, they could split up the cap hit from his dead cap hit from this season to basically over 2 years. If he, there's just a way to do it. Can't remember exactly how. I'll have to, refresh myself with those notes I have somewhere. But there's a way to do it, and if he does get traded, a team could bring him on for a $15 million cap hit, which isn't that massive. And so there are just so many decisions here at the quarterback position for the Packers going forward, and we'll see. We'll really see what happens here. When it comes to the future of the Packers, when it comes to what Brian Gutekunst decides to do, when it comes to the draft, all those kinds of things, because I think Rodgers' decision sort of shakes all of that up and is going to change the face of the franchise here in Green Bay. So those are sort of my overall views on the Packers right now. And also, I want to discuss a couple random things here at the end of this podcast. As I said, we'll see if I keep doing this going forward. Feel free to comment your thoughts down below. It's sort of more of a longer format than just my typical videos on YouTube, which are more they're typically pretty quick. Lots of news, lots of sort of just discussing one topic at a time on YouTube. But today I decided this morning, why not try a podcast, try to do something a little bit longer and sort of see how it goes, see how I enjoy it. But I've enjoyed it so far. And if I keep this up, I also may want to talk about a couple random things that just pique my interest, whether that's about the Packers, whether that's about the NFL, whether that's about the sports world in general, one thing that is interesting going forward is to see what happens with the Raiders, because Aaron Rodgers' name, sort of flying around with those teams that people think he could potentially get traded to. I even saw yesterday or the day before, when it comes to betting odds, the Raiders are now apparently ahead of the Packers, and I think that partly has to do with Devontae, saying that he wants Rodgers to come to Las Vegas, which, it's an unfortunate situation for Devontae Adams, just because, one of the reasons he left Green Bay, which there were multiple, but one of the reasons was because Aaron Rodgers and his uncertainty of how long he would be playing. Devontae didn't want Rodgers to come back for like 1 year after he signed a long, a sort of extended contract, and then have Rodgers leave and not be with Rodgers anymore. And so he went to the Raiders, where I'm assuming Devontae thought Derek Carr would be there for more than one season, because right now the Raiders are in that situation where they're going to have to find a new quarterback because they decided to move on from Carr, and it's a little complicated with the Carr situation because I think there's some kind of deadline in 7 days where if they don't release Carr in the next 7 days, he counts as like they have to pay him like $30-something million guaranteed, and so it's expected for them to release him before that time. And so there's a few different teams that could make sense for Derek Carr, and apparently I think he interviewed or met with the Saints yesterday, or he's going to meet soon with the Saints. And so the Raiders do need a quarterback. They do have the 7th overall draft pick. They could draft a QB up there. They could trade for someone like Aaron Rodgers, which, if Rodgers is traded, wouldn't be that crazy to see Rodgers go to Las Vegas. The question is, would the Raiders want to give up that number 7 pick? And I talked about it the past week or so. If the Packers do trade Rodgers, it does set up a better future when, with Jordan Love, just because you're going to get some draft capital. Likely at least a first-round pick, maybe a second, maybe a third as well. We'll see what happens there if that happened. But the thing is, if you trade Rodgers, you're going to have some more draft capital to bolster your unit going forward, to surround Jordan Love with some more young talent, whether that's on offense, whether that's on defense. And one thing, too, I think regardless of Rodgers or Love starting in 2023, the Packers, I think in the first 2 rounds, need to target a pass catcher. I wouldn't be opposed to, tight end in the first round or second round. There's a Michael Mayer who could make sense in the first round at 15. There's a few other tight ends. There's Kincaid, I believe. There's, what's his name? Luke something. Can't remember. Need to refresh my mind on that one. But there's lots of talented tight ends in the first couple of rounds that the Packers could target. And I think that even though I think Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs are going to be great players and a great duo going forward, I think the Packers just need another weapon here in Green Bay. And so if Love takes over, if Rodgers is here, it makes sense to bring in another weapon. And when you look at the receiver situation right now in Green Bay, Randall Cobb and Allen Lazard are both free agents. And so we don't know if they'll be back. I think that sort of could have to do with Rodgers' decision. When is he going to come back? Is he going to come back in that? I think if Rodgers comes back, Randall Cobb will be back. But I think if Rodgers does not come back, I don't see the Packers bringing back Randall Cobb. It's a little different in my mind when it comes to Allen Lazard because, as I said, with 2 young receivers in Green Bay, you can throw in Samori Toure as well, who could take some steps forward. But I feel like you need some kind of veteran presence in that locker room at receiver, just because you have some young players in Watson, Dobbs, Toure, who are going to be in their second year. And I think whether that's Lazard or a free agent receiver, the Packers need to add someone there when it comes to that. And when it comes to Lazard, we don't know if the Packers want to pay him what he thinks he's worth. I saw a rumor flying around that maybe, I believe it was posted on Instagram by the Lambeau Leapers page, so I'm not 100% sure if this is 100% factual, but there were some rumors flying around that he was looking for $15 to $17 million a year, which I think may be a little too expensive for a guy like Allen Lazard. I think he's a great, solid receiver, but I'm not sure he's worth 15 to 17. Maybe more so in the range of like a 10 to 12 million. If you look at Marquez Valdes-Scantling last season, he ended up getting signed for, $10 million a year by the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'd be willing to pay Lazard a little more than MVS just because I think he's a little bit more of an all-around receiver. MVS, more of just a deep threat, even though he can do a little bit more. But Lazard is great in the running game, blocking. Matt LaFleur always mentions that. He also is productive in the receiving game, and he was the Packers' leading receiver in 2022. And so if let's say Love comes in as quarterback, Randall Cobb leaves, Jordan Love needs more than just Dobbs and Christian Watson. So whether we sign Lazard to some kind of deal, whether we find some kind of free agent out there, sign them to a deal, or whether when it comes to the draft, we could target a receiver maybe in the first or second round. There's a lot of solid options there, I think, for the Packers if they want to take a swing there. The thing is, of course, the Packers have always been hesitant to draft receivers, at least in round one. We have found many gems in round two. Christian Watson, for example, Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, and there are some guys at receiver who could be targeted in round two as well. So the Packers have many different decisions to make going forward, so it will be interesting to follow as it always is. And then a few other random things I'll touch on before I end this podcast here today, just sort of around the sports world. LeBron broke the all-time scoring record last night. I did not watch it. It was a little too late for me. I like to go to bed somewhat at a reasonable hour. Oh, sorry about that. That was my timer for 30 minutes. But LeBron broke the scoring record, and it's crazy to see. Just growing up watching LeBron James, and in like junior high, I had a LeBron James poster on my wall. I was a huge LeBron fan, especially in his early days with the Cavs before he goes to the Heat. And I followed him for a long, long time. So it's crazy to sort of see a guy who, sort of grew up with breaking records. And it's going to be sad when LeBron stops playing, when Aaron Rodgers stops playing, to see Tom Brady retire. It's just the guys like that. For me personally, growing up as a kid, as a teenager, like watching these guys all the time, it's like it's odd seeing them getting up there in age and breaking records and retiring. And so huge. It's been a great career for LeBron James. And then to finish it off here, I live in Dallas, as I've mentioned sometime in the past, but we got Kyrie Irving here in Dallas, and I haven't been someone who's followed the NBA like super, super closely the past couple of years. I follow more sort of in the playoffs, but the Mavs have definitely taken some steps forward with Luka, but now we have Kyrie, and so now I'm a little bit more hyped about the NBA. Kyrie's first game with the Mavs is tonight, so I'll probably be tuning into that one. But it should be interesting to sort of see because hopefully he can bring a championship here to the Mavs. And as a Dallas resident, I'm definitely not a Cowboys fan, 100% Packers fan. Probably the Cowboys are one of my worst favorite teams, but I figure there has to be some team that in Dallas that I actually like. And so to have Kyrie come to play with Luka has me pretty excited for what could be here in Dallas. But I just want to cover a couple random things here as well. But that is all I want to cover today. If you guys enjoyed this, feel free to, subscribe wherever you're listening to this, YouTube, Spotify if I get it there, the newsletter if that's where you're watching from, feel free to subscribe. But thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. If you want to see more of these podcasts, let me know in the comment section somewhere, and I'll see if maybe I'll do some more going forward. But that is all for this Wednesday. And I'll see you guys next time.